So Gavin McInnes filed a lawsuit against the Southern Poverty Law Center for defamation. Good. I mean, as much as I appreciate all the things that they've done in fighting against the actual racists and fascist groups, what they've been doing recently, I think, has contributed a lot more to division, censorship, and a confusion about terminology, especially.
The Southern Poverty Law Center. They've been around a long time, right? This is going to be a very interesting story to see how this all unfolds.
They've been going after people who burn down black churches, KKK people, just people who I think both you and me would find pretty despicable. And even later on, they were going after larger groups who still advocated for racial separation, no race mixing, things like that. So they have a very good legacy. But right now, the people that they've been going after, not just Gavin, but also the founder of Jihad Watch, who is against Muslim extremism, or even somebody like, poor Ben Carson, who is the last person I would think of being labeled as a hateful extremist.
So I find it very interesting, their focus on right-wing extremism. I find it very conspicuous who's missing from their list of things to be aware of.
Antifa.
There's no Antifa. There's no Muslim extremists.
They did get the black Israelites in there. They recently got famous again because they were protesting against the Covington kids at that pro-life rally, along with the Indian dude who was drumming next to them.
Well, that's good. I also noticed they don't have any pedophile groups. I imagine if you're trying to target hate and root it out, it just seems like they're missing a lot of clear hate groups. And so I wonder, what is the strategy or the agenda on focusing on right-wing extremists? When I think about it, if you're a right-wing extremist, whatever that is, right-wing is typically the small government side. So it seems like they're trying to frame it as, anyone that is anti-government supremacy is some kind of ethnic supremacy by the nature of whatever their skin color is. But that's when they start getting weird. They start calling if you're Japanese or black, you can be or Jewish, you can all be white supremacists. You can be multiculturally white supremacist. And I wonder, I'm not sure that makes any sense at all. I have no problem if they want to frame it as, what about right-wing extremists who are human supremacists, right? What about right-wing extremists who are anti-government supremacy and pro-human supremacy? And I know they support trans rights, and I'm a transhumanist, so I'm totally sympathetic to defending morphological freedom and making sure that rights in the future aren't infringed upon so that people can experiment on their own bodies or live the way they want, have some of these life extension therapies available to them. So I understand why there's a need for some of these agendas and to set the record straight in the courts. But I don't understand the chilling effect that they're trying to have on Gavin Newsom and all their disproportionate.
Gavin McInnes.
Right, Gavin McInnes.
Well, they were conflating not just white nationalism, but also fascism in general as being something inherently connected by some weird chain to right-wing people who I also think are more or less for a smaller government. Sometimes there are certain organizations like the Council of Conservative Citizens where both paleo-conservative ideas and racist ideas are conflated together. But as far as what exactly fascism is, because if you go to Wikipedia and look up fascism, the the entry for it is a form of radical authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society and of the economy, which came to prominence in the early 20th century Europe. Now, the things that are in the top of this definition, I would attribute a lot more to people who are currently censoring those that they find to be so bigoted and discriminatory.
What did you think of Ali Alexander's stream outside of the Southern Poverty Law Center with McInnes and Coleman?
Well, I like how Gavin McInnes was dressed up as Colonel Sanders. I thought that was pretty funny. And I think everybody displayed really good conduct, very professional, and they were talking about the building itself being like a Darth Vader-ish evil empire sort of thing.
Listen, I love that he was looking like a Sanders, like a Trotskyite, some kind of Santa or something, but I wasn't buying the evil empire thing. I was looking closely at that building, and at first I was asking myself, is this a brutalist building? Right? Brutalism. I'm always very interested in like why bureaucratic buildings love the brutalism. But then I saw it as an unimposing building. It's very plain looking, considering they have a $500 million war chest. It seemed very mild. It seemed, big and like it had a strong presence, but I didn't see an evil empire building. I'm sorry, McInnes, that's not what it looks like to me, but I'm sympathetic to the fact that they could definitely target the wrong people. And I've noticed negligence on their listings, Nawaz, who's Sam Harris.
Nawaz. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Majid Nawaz is a moderate Muslim who used to be a radical Muslim, and he calls against both Islamophobia and Muslim extremism. And they had to retract the statements that they made about him, and they apologized, saying that we didn't look too closely at it. But to me, what that means is that you shouldn't take the word of the Southern Poverty Law Center as gospel when you're going after groups who you perceive to be bigoted. But a big problem that ends up happening, I think, is a lot of people, especially in the coastal areas, they go to work, they're not political, they just go along to get along, and it's going to be way harder for them to defend people who have been labeled with the scarlet letter of fascist, as opposed to doing research, finding out, oh, they're not really fascist. Because whenever I try to explain, like piece by piece, as far as, let's say, the Proud Boys go, how, sure, you could disagree with the way that they handle themselves, the way that they... I think some of them may like getting into fights, getting like red blood from defending against Antifa and stuff like that. And I'd say that's a little bit, it's not my cup of tea. But still, as far as what exactly they stand for, the media has been doing a pretty piss poor job at explaining it. Because there was one article, for example, from the Daily Beast that had the following quote in it. How if you Proud Boys want to go to that Unite the Right rally, like I Can't Stop You. They didn't include the I Can't Stop You part. What they ended up saying was, just don't wear your Fred Perry or decide to belt proud of your boy, which is that quote that the Proud Boys say. And they left out the most important thing, I think, which is, remember, we don't allow racists and Proud Boys. If you decide to rub elbows with those people in colors, you very well could find yourself being disavowed. And that's an important thing, I think, to leave out. And it tells me something. It tells me that they're portraying these people who they may not personally like as something akin to skinheads. Even in that same article, they were talking about the rise of skinheads and how now hate is becoming re-legitimized. And this idea of hate, it's like such a tricky word. It's like such a Precrucian bed, like you can take something like actual racists and then take people who are more, I'd say, cultural critics. And I don't think there's anything bad about criticizing culture as long as you don't force people like a bunch of fascists to not do certain things, like impose your will on certain people. That is something that I'm wholeheartedly against, and I don't see him doing that.
So it reminds me of McCarthyism in a lot of ways, which is funny. I'm not that familiar with the history. I have impressions, my understanding of McCarthy is he's been kind of blacklisted by history. And there's a difference between McCarthy, the man, and the things he did, and then the McCarthyism, which kind of ran away from him, right? So there was the hysteria witch hunt that's associated with McCarthy that we call McCarthyism, right? But that's not what McCarthy did. Like, McCarthy wasn't actually doing that. He had the list of names, which he publicly spoke about on television, and then correctly I did identify communists who were in the government. But it doesn't really matter, because now, after all these lessons we got through Hollywood about how we never want to have one of these blacklistings again, right? You have Jim Carrey's film The Majestic, which is about someone who was in the Communist Party or something, and then he's blacklisted and he gets amnesia. And I think that if you think about what's happening to Gavin McInnes with his deplatforming, and suddenly, like, he can't bank anymore, and you know, my own experiences, I feel like I flirt with a fine line when it comes to telling people just my thoughts freely. Like, I just go MAGA or Trump 2020, you know, and suddenly there can be a McCarthy type backlash if people really are that fearful or full of hate or just full of partisanship.
When I was talking about libertarianism to this one woman at NYU at this virtual reality thing, her first reply was that they were misogynist. Like, in her head, that's what she associates with libertarianism. And I think there are a lot of people for whom not just the Proud Boys, but somebody like Rand Paul, or somebody who's even more of like a milquetoast conservative, like, they'll look at them as being proponents of fascism. But I think Huckabee is a good example of somebody who is a good indicator where the line is drawn. So going back to that Council of Conservative Citizens, which the SPLC was very much against, and it was giving that organization as one of the reasons why they're not just going after KKK members, but how they've expanded to more of these higher level political organizations. So they were saying about this Council of Conservative Citizens that it is a racist hate group. And like I said before, they have a lot of racist elements in there. Huckabee, along with Bob Barr, were invited to some conferences that they were doing, that council. And as soon as they found out what these people stood for, they instantly disavowed them. They said that we don't want to have anything to do with organizations that are racist. And it's very clear and it's very simple. So I look at those milquetoast Republicans as being an indicator of what exactly is racist and hateful and what isn't. And from what I currently saw, there's nothing that imposes your will on people from the stuff that the Proud Boys were talking about, nor is there discrimination based on things that you were born into. Like, if it's a cultural thing, I think it's a little different.
He was in trouble the same way that Milo was in trouble on Twitter. That Milo had a troll swarm, and they were directing at people that Milo would sort of focus on. And so they cut him down, not because of what he was saying, but because of like the mob mentality of his followers. So Gavin is in trouble not even because of his beliefs, because they're saying he's responsible for everyone that follows him.
Well, it's a good question as far as how much control or how much responsibility do people have to the things that their followers do. The basic thing would be the actual guidelines of your organization, what you're for, what you're against. But life isn't so simple. Right?
Even Jack was saying he doesn't know why Alex Jones was kicked off Twitter, which was kind of a dodge. My understanding was they kicked him off because they didn't like how he went up to Marco Rubio. And I that's the kind of stuff that I imagine these people want to discourage. I think no one's seen how social media was going to change the whole landscape. And now the whole mainstream approach of the political theater has completely changed. And so now us youngins are coming up and changing the game. So I think they just want to have a modicum of control, which is fine. But, you know, the thing is, focusing on the Proud Boys, like, I think it's important to focus on like the things that the Proud Boys did wrong and all the problems with it, instead of just like being dumb. I think that it's clear, like, I've heard of some of the worst things the Proud Boys have done, and it's still an odd story, right? So like, even if I were to ignore all the good things and the exculpatory things, if I were to just focus on the bad things, it's still really strange to me how Ben Carson ends up on that list, how Nawaz ends up on that list, why there's no like Islamic extremists on the list. Why is it focusing on only right-wing extremists? Why not left-wing extremists? And I really think it has to do with what a right-wing extremist is on paper. What they should be is a small government, politically minded person, right? And so to me, it seems like they're manufacturing hate, while they say they stand for getting rid of hate and nipping it in the bud. They're not doing a Martin Luther King approach of, you know, driving out darkness with love. They're not doing like a Black Klansman approach of like, okay, I'm going to don the hood and then compel these people away from their hate group with love, and by like just teaching them other ways of thought, by exposing them to other ideas. They're an anti-right-wing group, and they say anti-right-wing extremist, so I guess that makes us right-wing extremists, right? Because we're even daring to talk about this. But I think it'd be really interesting to play with the frame of human supremacy versus government supremacy. And I'm a transhumanist, right? So human supremacy doesn't mean you're anti-robots or you're anti-AI, right? Just like being for government supremacy doesn't mean you should be like for robot enslavement of everybody. But I think that this is the tug of war. These are the conversations that people want to have. And it's really unfortunate that the Southern Poverty Law Center isn't like keeping us safer and like cleaning up our society, but if they're actually like mutating estranged pockets of our culture to be more malignant, and then so that they can like point to their straw men villains to justify like larger sweeps.
Well, the FBI reported a reduction in hate crimes of 24% between 1998 and 2013, while the SPLC claimed that the amount of hate groups have shot up around 75% during the same time. So what does that tell you?
Well, I think, and the fact that Antifa is not on the list, like the point of the Proud Boys is, I thought, to oppose Antifa.
It's one of those things where they've committed to a certain idea of conservative.
I don't think so. They could change. No, they could totally change. They have $500 million in the bank. They could become a clothing company. Like that's the thing. It's like Kenneth Cole started out as a film production company, and then they started making clothes. So I don't want to pigeonhole the Southern Poverty Law Center and say they've committed to this agenda and they're never going to change. And like that's exactly how people calcify each other. They say, oh, some people can just never be persuaded. Oh, some people just like can't change their minds. They just dig in their heels and they choose a partisan side and blah, blah, blah. It's bogus. It's not how people actually work. But if you program them that way, it can make progress a lot more difficult. But, you know, if you wake up the NPCs and they go, wait a second, like maybe I should stop telling myself that I'm unpersuadable and everyone else around me is unpersuadable. And the second people stop telling themselves that storyline, people become more curious and interested about talking to things and more excited by the prospect of being persuaded. I love being persuaded. So I think that the Southern Poverty Law Center, good intentions aren't good enough. And so for all the good things they've done, that's great. And that's in the past. But what the heck is up with their negligent mistakes and their odd choices, and then the blinders they put on to the areas of society that do foster this festering hate, And then what are their solutions? Are they just like a money-making, like political machine, or are they making the world a better place? And if they're driving out hate and reforming people and healing people, then that's amazing. But for some reason, I feel like they're doing divide and conquer and then mutating and isolating these pockets, which could be healed and transformed if people were just given an opportunity to talk to them. I saw a documentary on Netflix or Hulu. It was about the alt-right or racism. They had a Vice reporter, I believe, and she was a Black woman and talking to all these like racist whites. And it was like a really touching documentary because she was even like making them question themselves, and they were like changing their minds just because they were talking to a nice person. They were just talking to a nice person. And then all it takes sometimes is talking to one nice person to realize that like most of the things you believe are unfounded. And the problem is, if you're making it impossible for people in society to have that kind of catharsis, like, are you really doing a good job? Or are you just like that kid in the playground who's like sucking up to the teacher, to the nanny or whatever, and like actually causing fractures and conflict? And like, is it, you know, that like when you turn people against each other, when you tattle on people, and
yeah,
like, it's, you know, I think that there's a lot of different ways to solve these problems. And, you know, there's a lot worse lawyers. I know people that get a law degree so they can sue people for a living. Like, they'll fall outside your place of business and they'll sue you for a crack in the sidewalk, or they'll spill coffee on themselves and they'll sue you for the scorching heat. And, you know, the Southern Poverty Law Center is clearly not one of these opportunistic litigators, but I do think that they've evolved over time, and they've possibly gotten too big for themselves, because you even told me these stories. Well, they'll put someone up there like an anti-gay group or something, and then someone goes in there and kills a bunch of people they think are bigots, and then they're like, oh, oops, sorry. Like, sorry about our authority that is baseless because we were wrong about that. So like, sorry, you just killed all these innocent people. And that hurts the people that believe their propaganda, and it hurts the people that are victims of it. And like, so they clearly have the ability to ruin lives. And this is why Peter Thiel went off after Gawker, because they were, well, Gawker in particular, he thought was a sociopathic, just like trash hole. And they were invading people's private lives. And I don't think the Southern Poverty Law Center is invading private people's lives, but they are wrecking lives of people that we need to have it like a strong national fabric, right? If you have Antifas becoming popularized, and then like our rappers and our musicians and our actors and people, like, they're allowed to be Antifa, but you're not allowed to say you're anti-Antifa because you're fascist. The whole framing is wrong, right?
Well, see, even the strong national fabric word that you used, for some people, that would already be enough to set them apart from you, unfortunately. But those could be the same people that have...
Why?
Because some people, like, going back to the idea of conflating conservatism...
I want someone to tell me what's wrong with nationalism.
Their idea is that once people get too conservative or too nationalistic, then their secret racism and their secret bigotry is finally going to come out in the open.
I think that's not what people think. That's not the best argument against nationalism.
It's not, but that's still what some people think. And I don't even think it's some people. I think it's a lot of people that I've personally talked to. That's one of their biggest fears.
They think nationalism is xenophobic.
They think it would definitely lead to xenophobia.
I think nationalism is exclusionary. So
yes.
If you're a nationalist, it means like people that aren't of your nationality are others. And, okay, well, that's not what nationalism has to mean. Just like there's multiple types of globalism. Like, I'm a national globalist, all right? You can think of that like a globalist, right? Like living globally. right? Because I love localism, right? So localism and nationalism are not the same thing, right? At the end of the day, I don't really care about, like I care about like America as an eternal idea much more than I care about like the legal entity of America, right? So what that means is city-states are a lot more stable than like national boundaries, right? So let's say Canada joined America or California left and rejoined Mexico. LA would still be LA, right? New York would still be New York. Toronto would still be Toronto. So, the national boundaries can change, but like at the local level, like things don't really change that much unless you're having a diaspora and a lot of demographic changes. So like I understand globalists who are saying like, oh, we want like a whole global world, like we want a one world government. Like I've been listening to Destiny on Twitch.
Yeah.
With Hassan Parker's friends, and he is quite articulately in favor of a one world government, and he'll talk about how you can create it through NATO and the EU and the WTO and all these different bodies. So all the things that Alex Jones says people are trying to do and doesn't want, Destiny is talking about how he thinks that's a great idea. And so he's a refugee from Cuba. His parents are Cuban. He says they're conservative. He says he's as far left as you can possibly be. And so, hey, it's out in the open. Now we should be able to talk about it. But if you're character assassinating people that would talk against this stuff, then you're creating a quagmire. And I don't think that is the point of the Southern Poverty Law Center.
There may be certain people in the Southern Poverty Law Center which, like the people I was describing, whose minds are not able to change. But I imagine, just like the point that you were bringing up, there are people who are probably volunteering there, working there, who, if you got to speak with them one-on-one, calmly discuss various issues that you may have and that they have, you'll come to, if not an understanding, you'll at least show them that this isn't a monster under the bed. This is a human being who wants the best for people, who doesn't want to discriminate against others, who just wants people to live up to as high of an expectation as they can give themselves. And I think that's what we want for everyone. But unfortunately, I've also seen videos of journalists coming up to certain Antifa protesters or whoever was protesting against Donald Trump, for example. And as soon as they start having a calm conversation with them, some other person comes in with a whistle and just gets in their face, blocks the cameras. So the conversation stops right there. There are people who do want to stop the conversation, who don't want people to get along, who want all this division and sow chaos and create a world where it's either they're going to win or they're going to lose. And that's the way they like it. And I personally hate that entire idea. I think we should join up because I think most people care about the same stuff.
Right. I think that government supremacy is a zero-sum game. And I think like a bottom-up, decentralized approach to globalizing, like a global solution. Like imagine we got rid of all the tariffs. Imagine we got all the tariffs and then we can sell our t-shirts to people in China and Australia and Afghanistan and like everywhere in the world. And the governments didn't interfere with people. Like I was listening to Destiny talk about how the problem with the system now is like he would talk about how all the regulations and different governmental bodies make things difficult. And he didn't seem to be like putting together how that was the problem.
Like, what do you expect is going to happen?
He was like, let's have more of this. Like all these things is a big problem. Everything's not working. Let's do more of that. But I do think it's important to make progress with these people and to not find yourself, because now they're talking about pitchforks and stuff. Like Hassan Parker, like what's so crazy about them is they're like actively trying to stir up hate. Like they want a revolt. They want a revolution. And it's crazy because Hassan's from Turkey. His uncle's from Turkey. They're political refugees. they're here. America's welcomed them and embraced them. And they're saying billionaires are immoral and they want radical redistribution
and no borders.
Done through policy or through pitchforks, right? They want no borders. They want illegal immigrants to come in. They're not really paying attention to what's going on as much as they're paying attention to their talking points. And I think they really believe in their government vision. And I don't think they see the opportunities of cryptocurrency and decentralization and bottom-up approaches. So when you have like a strong nationalist like us who aren't xenophobic, we love refugees. My ex-girlfriend helped her get her green card. I have friends from all over the world.
I'm a refugee. My family came here from Russia because America was kind enough to let us in, and I'm very grateful for that. And I don't really, I don't like that people think that they could just go through the back door without any problem. And I think it makes it harder for people who actually come through the front door and come from situations where they're legitimately being persecuted. Like, I would love for America to let even more refugees in who are in a dangerous situation, like some Yazidis in the Middle East, Christian refugees from places in the Middle East where they're constantly being persecuted upon. America does have, just like a lot of other countries have, a mandate to take care of people who cannot take care of themselves and to also lend a helping hand for people who are being persecuted. At the same time, though, to bring this back to Gavin McInnes and the Proud Boys, what folks like them appreciate is Western civilization. And as far as Western civilization goes, you could call it something else. I know we have a term that we've been throwing around a lot, Atlantean civilization, where we take the best stuff from all kinds of different civilizations and cultures and just incorporate them, enculturate them into whatever it is that we do, as long as they're tolerant of the way other people live their lives, but at the same time have certain norms as far as, you know, not beating up your kids on a regular basis, you know, things like that, things that make sense to people. And at the same time, you know, praising good work ethic, high cultural standards, all that kind of good stuff. I don't have a problem with it. And I think people conflate the idea of having, you know, discriminating against different civilizations versus discriminating against individuals. Because I don't believe that there is anything in an individual that prevents them from ascending into whatever civilization they want to be a part of. That's the history of the United States right there. In fact, an Italian friend of mine was talking about how in Italy right now, with the migrant crisis that's going on there, the Italians are becoming a lot more racist than they've ever become because they were just used to being among other Italian people. And now all of a sudden there's this infusion of new people that they don't really know what to do with. And as far as America goes, we've gone through so many hurdles when it comes to horrible things that we did, like slavery, and the civil rights movement helped ease a lot of problems during the mid-20th century. So we're constantly improving ourselves and getting along with people, but all of us share, I think, well, not all of us, but I think a lot of us share certain American values. Like when we moved here from Russia, one of the first differences that we've noticed in American culture versus Russian culture was how everybody wanted to help us out, lend a hand, like complete strangers volunteered to help us move our furniture up to our apartment. And when my grandma got lost on the way, she was buying some stuff, there was just a random person who immediately helped her out, like, here, you have to go here and here and here. They didn't need to do that, but they did it. And what is that force that helps people, or what is that force that tells people, like, you're not going to get anything out of helping this old lady, but you're going to do it anyway? Like, I think that's something that's built up into American culture, and that's the kind of culture that I want to propagate.